This morning on Carolina This Week, we're going to talk transit. Coast RTA, the new director, Brian Piasick, is my guest. Carolina This Week starts right now.
This is Carolina This Week. Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning. Welcome to Carolina This Week. Coast RTA, the Grand Strand's bus system, has a new director. This comes after a few years of controversy. ABC 15's Jack Lamson has a look back.
It's out with the old and in with the new at Coast RTA. From the boardroom to the streets of Horry and Georgetown counties, there's new bosses, buses, and a unanimously agreed upon $1 million budget.
The board of Coast RTA deserves the credit. They made some pretty serious moves, some bold steps, and they needed to. And so they showed County Council that they're serious.
The first of those serious moves was finding someone to lead. Brian Piasick was first introduced to County Council and Chairman Mark Lazarus in April. His introduction and a vote of confidence from Lazarus should have been the highlight of the meeting. But before they could move forward, Lazarus had a message for outgoing board chairman Bernard Silverman.
Mr. Silverman, before you bring Mr. Piasick on, I think you need to clean your house. I think you need to clean your house. You got insubordination.
And clean they did.
Well, the main staffing thing that I was involved in was the interim general manager, Julie Norton-Dew, resigned at the very end. And it was council's desire that she leave the company. I was probably the last person on board with that.
COO Felicia Beatty also resigned. Lazarus says there was no direct request from council for those two to go, but did say it was probably implied.
She did it for Coast. She knew what had to happen. And now I look back, and it's not very far back, but I agree with council. You know, Julie and others in that administration had to leave and let Brian, you know, take over the reins and be his own general manager.
It's been a busy first 2 months at the reins for Piasick. Since coming on board, he's ordered 10 new buses, 5 of which are already in service. He's also brought in a new maintenance director to keep the fleet rolling.
I don't think there's really been any wrongdoing of any ilk whatsoever. I think we've just made some bad management decisions in the past. So I want to promise what we can deliver and then do it well.
Piasick's been trying to do it well since his days driving a bus at the University of Virginia. 30 years later, the transportation veteran has the support of Coast's board.
He brings a planning component, and I think that's what we've been missing. I think that's what we need to convince our funders.
Piasick is also winning over County Council. At the same meeting back in April, he said he'd like to move Coast RTA's headquarters east of the waterway.
Every bus that leaves this lot behind me takes about an hour, 45 minutes to get to the beach.
At the time, it was an idea that didn't sit well with Lazarus, but now...
Well, Brian's selling me on it, you know, and we said, you're a planner, Brian, show us the plan, show us the dollars where it makes sense. Well, he's already come up of a $250,000 savings to Coast RTA from maintenance and fuel that it would save by having a facility on the east side of the waterway.
But what does that mean for the current facility here in Conway? Piasick stressed they do want to have a presence here, adding this could become a park and ride facility. In Conway, Jack Lamson, ABC 15 News.
All right, and Brian Piasick is my guest this morning on Carolina This Week. And Brian, you, if you had been here about 6 months ago and seen a lot of the stories that were running, maybe you would have said, I don't know that I want to walk into that.
Well, it was a pretty long and arduous selection process. So I actually saw a lot of those from behind the scenes.
Yeah. What do you think? What did you think when you took the job? Is this a challenge? Is this something that you're going to have to work hard to turn around? Or is it something that you think is relatively easy fix?
Well, I don't know. I think I know what needs to be fixed. I think it's not necessarily hard. It's just going to take a while. It's going to be a lengthy process.
Now, I've told you, but full confession, my sister does what you do, and she's done it in several cities, and she's 15 years older than me, so I kind of grew up around transit. And I understand that a lot of what you do is working for grants. A lot of what you do is dependent upon what government will give you, and you have to have your hand out a lot of times. Do you think that you're going to be able to get the support you need to get people to and from work, basically, around here.
I think so. I mean, I think that because we are a government-funded entity, I mean, I think a lot of people mistake us for maybe more of a public service. And I really like to think of transit as being infrastructure. So we fund transit like we fund roads. And you know, it's a transportation option. It helps roads operate better. And if we get people to start thinking that way, that even if they're not using the bus, you know, the support will come.
I've got to think that the Myrtle Beach, Grand Strand area is kind of unique when it comes down to transit because it's so spread out. In a bigger city, you have more concentrated masses of people, and it's probably easier to convince them to hop on a bus to go from one place to another. But being so spread out, people get used to their cars. People may not necessarily want to turn their keys in to wait at a bus stop that they have to walk a mile to get to anyway, because they're so spread out.
Well, and cars are really convenient. But if you think about it, the geography of this area is just like Miami, but it's without the Everglades. We've got to go inland a little bit more than they do in Miami. And it is a very difficult service area to serve. But there are, you know, there's people that have need, you know, they don't have any other alternatives. But I've been on a few routes already, and there are people who are parking their cars and using the system. So they're out there that'll use it.
So I imagine a big part, when you look at this, is the new guy coming in, you look at it, I've got to think that the people that the big part of the job is moving people from inland to jobs on the Strand and then back home again.
You would think about it. I mean, that's probably the most expensive part of what we do, but it's not the only thing. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, you get them to one point at the beach and you still have to distribute them. You know, you get them to our transit center, that's not where they're working. You have to get them to places other than the transit center. So a large part of what we're doing is distributing people once they get to the beach. And then there's always the people that either live or are there at the beach for other reasons that need to get distributed as well. And we do quite a bit of that with routes like our entertainment shuttle, which is taking people from downtown on Ocean Boulevard out to Broadway at the beach.
Mentioned the situation you came into, a lot of allegations, accusations, board having to fire people before you came in. Are the books in order now? Do you think that you're going to be able to have a strong financial base to go from?
Well, I'll tell you what I told Jack the other day. I mean, I don't think there's really been any wrongdoing per se. I mean, I think our issues have been more management decisions. And would I have done things differently? Absolutely. Are there some things that I still need to fix? Yes. The accounting is predominantly in order. I brought in a temporary CFO, somebody who I knew in the business that I respect really much, and he's helped me out a lot to at least get a handle on where the money is. There's some things like we need to do. We need to go back and look at FY15 to make sure that we've drawn federal funds to the max. I don't believe that we have. So we've overused our local funding here in the last year, and that's something that I need to go back and correct. And FTA will let us do it if we have a good reason.
Well, we've seen our bus system up in the the PD transit system. They nearly had to shut down. Buses are big, they're expensive, they break down, they have to be replaced. I mean, I don't mean to be, you know, blowing this really downtrodden horn to you, but it just seems like there's a lot working against mass transit around here.
It's certainly not easy. You know, there's a saying in the business that you need to do preventive maintenance. And, you know, if I use DART as an example, the Dallas system where I came from, they don't fix things that are broken. They fix them before they break. And that's really the key to maintaining your system. Now, granted, we've had some really old buses. Even the buses that we recently got from DART are 11 years old. But they've been well taken care of. And if we can continue that process, there's no reason why we can't run them for another 5 years. We'll put another engine in it. You know, all sorts of things, but we put that engine in before the engine that's in it already breaks, and that's the key.
So you have to convince the local government to get behind you. You have to convince the federal government to give you money. Then
and the state.
And the state. Then you got to convince people to ride, people to do that. And I know you're early on here, but what's your sell to people to use the bus?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, I think we need to do what we're doing better and well and reliably and start developing that track record, like the money that we're spending now is well spent. And then hopefully people will see the benefit of what we're doing and help me find money so we can put more investment into the system. I use transit in Dallas. I didn't use it every day. I tell people that if you use it one day out of the week, if everybody used transit one day out of the week, that would be 20% of their trips, and we'd have 20% less traffic. So you don't have to use it every day. It's not as convenient as having a car, but I tell people, even if you aren't using it, we're pulling other people who were using cars off the road, and it makes your commute easier. So it's still something that we should invest in.
And you think about 501 out there, and I know that 501 is something that you have thought about, and you're trying to get some of the buses off of 501 and look at some alternatives to that.
Right.
I want to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be back with Brian Piasick on Carolina This Week. Welcome back to Carolina This Week. Brian Piasick, the new director of the Coast RTA, Coast Regional Transportation Authority, is with us this morning. We're talking about buses. When you moved into town, probably like me, you had to drive on Highway 501.
Yes.
What'd you think?
It's a parking lot.
Yeah. And now you're talking about getting the buses off of 501.
Right.
And ABC 15's Liz Cooper attended a meeting where you presented parts of the plan to riders and tried to get some of their input. Here's a look.
Number 7 is Coast RTA's bus route from Conway to Myrtle Beach. General Manager and CEO Brian Piasick says for years they've been working to make that trip more efficient.
The biggest issue is trying to get out of traffic on 501, so we're using some other roads that parallel 501, and that's helped us with on-time performance as well as some new destinations.
They started a trial run of their plan in June, and Piasick says they're pleased with the results.
Mostly I've heard that our reliability is a lot better. Our on-time performance has gotten quite a bit better this summer.
In addition to changing the route, they're planning on making designated stops.
We'll put up our little bus flags and say the bus stops here, rather than having issues like the other day. I saw somebody getting on a route on a bus that was in a left turn lane, so they were crossing a live lane of traffic. We want to try to avoid that.
Customers who ride this route frequently are happy with the changes, like Pam Henricks, who lives in Carolina Forest.
The 501 Carolina Forest intersection is like the worst, and so if I can avoid having to go through there, and I was really pleased with the change they had for the summer, where they would pick you up over on Postal Way. So it was closer to my house to get the bus, and then it avoided that traffic.
She told me because of the public meeting Monday, she feels like Coast RTA values her opinion.
Well, I appreciate that they're asking the public who actually takes the bus, what do we need? If you make it convenient for people, I think more people will take public transportation.
And I know she's a rider because when I was driving into work yesterday down Postal Way, I saw her waiting on the bus.
Well, and she's certainly someone that we're glad she's using our system. She parks her car to ride every day as well.
So talking about moving off of 501, how crucial do you think that is? Why, I mean, it seems like almost like a no-brainer, and it's something we all hope that we get better roads around here to be able to avoid 501.
Sure, I mean, and the road network here is something that causes us angst as well. But the first week I was here, I had a meeting down at the Myrtle Beach City Hall, which is right across the street from our transfer center, and it ended at 5 o'clock. So I went out to see the 5 o'clock buses that show up there, and we call it a pulse system. All the buses meet there every hour and exchange passengers. Well, it was actually about 5:10 when I walked out there, and the 7 hadn't shown up yet, which is the route that goes up and down 501 between Conway and Myrtle Beach. And it didn't get there until about 5:30. So, the worst part of it is such an inconvenience to all those passengers sitting at downtown transit center waiting for that bus so we could complete the pulse. But from my perspective, I saw 4 drivers that all had to work an extra half an hour that day because of that traffic, and that cost me 4 hours of labor So it worked, you know, it's on both sides of the house, and, you know, we were looking for ways to make that service a little bit more consistent. And the routing that we've chosen, which I think we've cut the route from 80% 501 to 20% 501, and it runs about 53 minutes, so it's about an hour route. You get a little bit of time at either end for a driver to recover. And it's much more consistent. It's getting there and making the pulse in Myrtle Beach. And passengers like it because it's a little easier to get on it. Rather than getting on at somewhere along 501, we're getting on, you know, in behind the stores or in front of the stores off of 501. So it's a much safer way to provide the service.
I don't want to put you on the spot and ask you for too many numbers, but can you tell me where about ridership is right now and where you hope it will get to?
Well, the best service that we're operating right now is basically hourly service on any route. There's even a few routes that we miss a trip in the middle of the day, so we can extend service into the evening. And, you know, so the total pullout is actually about 12 buses. I could put 12 buses anywhere in Myrtle Beach and generate the ridership that we're generating, okay? So the answer is really expansion and getting more frequency and more routes out there. We run about 1,000 to 1,200 people a day on those 10 buses, which isn't too bad. I think there would be a lot better productivity, you know, if we had 20-minute service or 30-minute service even. We would ramp that up pretty considerably.
In the story that we heard before that Jack Lamson did, talking with Mark Lazarus, how you're slowly convincing Mark Lazarus that you need to be based on the east side of the waterway. What would the benefit there be, and when do you think that could happen?
Well, remember earlier we talked about how a lot of, you know, you asked about the trips coming in from Georgetown and Conway as being our bread and butter, and that is to a certain extent true, but most of our service is still all at the beach. And so every time a bus pulls out of my lot, it's 45 minutes to an hour to get down to the beach to enter into service. So we have a lot of expense that, you know, where we're sending buses out that aren't picking people up just to get them to the beach. And if we were staging our vehicles from some point east of the waterway, we could save, you know, up to $250,000. And what I would do is I would put that back into the service. You know, we wouldn't use it for deadhead, which is what we call it in the business. We'd use it for revenue service. And so I could put, you know, 1 or 2 more routes out on the street if we were able to do that.
So kind of maximizing maximizing efficiency where you've got the riders, service them to generate more money.
For business people, we're converting overhead into actual direct expense.
Gotcha. Something I've always been curious about. I'm from Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah, you know too much with your sister in the business. So.
I'm an insider. But being from Savannah, tourist town, having visited many tourist towns with my family, one that comes to mind is Gatlinburg, Tennessee, where they have free shuttles that will run people around. And I imagine that's paid for through hotels or through the chamber helps. Is that something that you think would be feasible? Because it seems to me like you've got such a mass of people looking to go to Broadway, back to the beach, back here.
And that shuttle is fare free. Our entertainment shuttle is fare free because it is designed for the tourists, but we don't get any money for it, except we're using our normal funding. I have approached the chamber and the hotel association about at least funding part of it, you know, to recoup the fares if it were a fare service. But I think that is something that we need to explore for sure.
What else do you think? What else is it going to take to make transit successful around here?
Well, I mean, there's a few things that, you know, in the first 2.5 months now that I've been here, I've seen and things that I want to address. I mean, and I've said this on a number of occasions. We have 200,000 people who live here, and our funding is based on the permanent residents. You know, both at the federal level and really the local level. And that's enough to run 12 buses. But we have the transportation issues of a system, I mean, of a city that has 300, 500, 800,000 people on any given weekend. So I really believe that the funding answer is getting some sort of tourism-based funding mechanism here to help us grow. I ran some statistics, and if you look at systems that serve 300 to 500,000 people, they average 121 buses. We have 12. So it just kind of gives you an indication of how undersized we are.
Right. Well, let's talk about how you plan on getting some of those new buses and just some final thoughts from you when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Carolina This Week. Brian Piasick, the new director of Coast RTA, is with us this morning, and we were talking before how a lot of areas that have our population have over 100 buses. Here we have
not so much.
12?
12
buses?
In peak service, yeah.
And a bus costs a lot of money. $200,000-$300,000 at least anymore, and that would be
pushing 400.
Pushing 400
for, what you'd want to put on it.
How many buses do you think we need right now? Did not want, but need to get service where you'd like it to be?
I don't know. To me, need and want are the same thing. I mean, I'm all about trying to address the needs. Between 50 and 100 someday. I think you have to aim big. I don't have a timeline or timetable on when all that will occur. To me, right now, it's really more important to kind of lay low, despite all the press I've been getting, to develop our track record, become more reliable system, good stewards of public dollars, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Do you see yourself being here for a while?
I do. I've always had a soft place in my heart for this area. I have young children, so I want to, give them a consistent school experience, and I don't really have any plans to leave. This is the only job I applied for, to be honest with you. I was in the private sector for 15 years. And I wanted to get off the road and be able to go home every night, and that's why I'm here.
I said I didn't mention that you were a consultant, so you've looked in on a lot of different systems and seen how they operate.
Yeah, and there's something appealing about being able to kind of focus on one project. I mean, I had days where I had 12 different projects, 12 different clients, and I've learned a lot during that time, and I've seen transit done right, so I feel like we could do it right here.
There are going to be people watching this, and I can't blame them, but don't necessarily agree with them because it's not my job to agree or disagree. But they might say, mass transit is not a necessity. It's not something we need around here. We are too spread out. Everybody has a car. What do you tell people who are down on transit?
Well, there's many people out there who I probably won't convince otherwise, and that's okay. I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I mean, I think that it's really important that I'm able to illustrate the benefits, and the benefits are pretty, pretty wide and far and far-reaching. I do hear people talk about what about a route to Charleston, or transit works much better on the shorter trips, and so you're right. The service area presents some challenges, but there's still some untapped markets. We don't have any routes in Carolina Forest. We don't have any routes in North Myrtle Beach. So there's some geographic expansion, but then I think there's a lot better that we can do for the existing routes.
All right. Brian Piasick, I wish you lots of luck, and
it.
Have you back here maybe in a year, see how you're doing.
All right. I look forward to it.
Cool. All right. We'll be right back with more Carolina This Week. Coming up next Sunday morning on Carolina This Week, the two candidates for South Carolina House District 106 will debate. That's next Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Have a great week.